Energy flow through an ecosystem. The vast majority of life on Earth depends on sunlight as its source of energy. Of all the energy that reaches the Earth from the sun, some of it penetrates the Earth's atmosphere and hits the surface of the Earth, but only a small quantity is used to drive the process of photosynthesis. Plants change sun's energy into food. More on this later in the next lesson. Consider the following image about how much of the energy that reaches Earth is actually used in photosynthesis. Trophic levels. Energy from the sun is transferred from one organism to the next through the different levels of food chains. These different levels in food chains are referred to as trophic levels. Consider the following simple food chain found in Newfoundland and Labrador with 3 trophic levels: birch tree, moose, black bear. First, there are producers. Notice that the pathway of energy flow in the food chain always begins with producers. Producers such as birch trees are also known as autotrophs because they make their own food. Other examples of producers are blueberry bushes, moss, lichens and algae. Trophic level 1 equals birch tree equals producer equals autotroph. Then there are the primary consumers. The moose is an example of a consumer. Consumers are called heterotrophs when they cannot make their own food. Heterotrophs must obtain their energy and nutrients from the organisms they eat. There are many levels of consumers. The moose is considered a primary consumer because it feeds directly on the plants. A primary consumer is also called an herbivore or plant eater. Trophic level 2 equals moose equals primary consumer equals herbivore, and then there are the secondary consumers. The black bear is also an example of a consumer. It is considered a secondary consumer and is called a carnivore. In this example, the black bear is also considered the top carnivore since there are no carnivores that feed on it. The black bear is considered to be at the top of the food chain. In this particular food chain, the black bear is a carnivore because it is a meat eater when it consumes moose meat. Trophic level 3 equals black bear equals secondary consumer equals carnivore. What? Not another term for black bears? Black bears also fit under the category of omnivore as well. An omnivore is an animal that eats both plants and animals. A wolf, on the other hand, would be a strict carnivore or meat eater since wolves do not have plants as part of their diet. It should be noted that an ecosystem may contain more than 3 trophic levels. Decomposers. Although the black bear is the top carnivore in this example, it is not actually the final consumer. Consider what happens when the black bear or any other member of the food chain dies. The final consumers in any food chain food web are the decomposers. Decomposers are organisms of decay that make use of wastes and remains of dead organisms. Decomposers are generally bacteria or fungi that break down the materials in the wastes and dead bodies of organisms so they may be recycled. Materials are recycled, but the energy that was stored in the food molecules is never recycled. Our simple food chain could therefore be modified as follows: birch tree, moose, black bear. Bacteria. Energy transfer. Every time energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next within an ecosystem, some of the energy changes form. Thus, not all of the energy produced by the birch tree will reach the moose that eats it. Also, the moose cannot store all of the energy that is made by the birch tree. The moose must use some to stay warm, to move around, to feed its young and so on. Once the energy has been used, it is not available to be transferred. When an animal such as a black bear eats the moose, only a small fraction of the energy produced by the birch tree reaches the moose. The further up the food chain you go, the less energy is available. In every ecosystem, there is less total energy available to secondary consumers than to primary consumers. Energy is lost on a continuous basis from all living things, usually in the form of heat. Of course, when plants and animals die, their bodies decompose and some of the energy goes back into the ecosystem. Pyramid of energy. The transfer of energy from one trophic level to the next is never 100% efficient since each organism must utilize some of the energy to support its own existence. This means that between 80% and 95% of the energy available at one trophic level is never transferred to the next higher level. No wonder there are so few coyotes in the ecosystem compared to the number of birch trees that support them. The idea that each higher trophic level has less energy available to it is known as the pyramid of energy. In the diagram below, the energy found in the bodies of the organisms is represented by the cube for that level. The larger the volume of the level, the greater the energy at that level. Note that energy is measured in joules, J, pyramid of biomass. Since the amount of water present within the tissues of different organisms varies, biologists use the dry mass of the organism for comparison since it is believed that dry mass more closely reflects the actual amount of living matter in the organism. The dry mass is known as biomass. The pyramid of biomass is a graphical representation of the total biomass of all the members of each trophic level. Generally, the pyramid of biomass has the same shape as the pyramid of energy. There is a large base representing the total biomass of the producers, with each higher trophic level having a progressively smaller size, representing the progressively smaller amount of biomass present. In a grassland environment, 10,000 kilograms of grass and other producers, dry mass, should support about 1,000 kilograms, dry mass, of grasshopper and other plant-eating insects. Pyramid of numbers. The pyramid of numbers is often similar in shape to the pyramid of energy or biomass, but there are exceptions. The pyramid of numbers is not as useful as the other ecological pyramids. It provides no information about the biomass and energy relationships from one trophic level to the next. Conditions necessary for a stable, self-sustaining ecosystem. Stability means that there is an ecological balance between the various organisms that make up the food web, and because of this balance the ecosystem is self-sustaining over long periods of time. To be stable there must be a balance between 1. Food production. Sunlight provides the energy and producers capture the sunlight and make food. 2. Food consumption. Food is consumed by animals as they eat other animals and thus food and energy passes from one animal to the next. 3. Decomposition of dead organisms and or their wastes. This allows for materials to get recycled. The greater the biodiversity in the ecosystem, the more stable it will be. The many interrelated food chains of an ecosystem give a community stability because every food level helps to control the numbers of organisms in the level below it. For example, predators such as lions help to ensure the health of the zebras. Some biologists have even remarked that the predator is the prey's best friend. The decomposers recycle the nutrients back to the plants. In turn, the plants grow to supply the food for the herbivores. Human impact on ecosystem energy. The impacts that humans had on energy flowing through an ecosystem were very minimal at first. Our early ancestors survived by collecting plants and eating animals that they caught, and thus their impact on the ecosystem was small. The two important demands on the ecosystem were plant and animals for food and wood for fuel. However, as human populations increased, their need for more energy, food, also increased. People started to practice agriculture by planting crops and raising animals. This allowed them to stay in one place, whereby trees would be cut and lumber used for building permanent houses. They also cleared land for farming, and the food produced allowed the human population to grow. Cutting down trees and clearing land will decrease the number of producers in an ecosystem and thus lower the numbers in the lower trophic levels. Less numbers in the lower trophic levels will result in less numbers in the higher trophic levels.